Welcome to the Gold Coast Speakers podcast, where speakers have conversations so that you can learn more about them, what they talk about, and who they are. My name is Carla Berbary, and I have the pleasure of talking with Mark Butler today. Mark does not just speak on mental health and leadership, but also challenging the way workplaces think about it altogether. Mark works at the intersection of psychology, leadership, and real-world workplace dynamics. And what I love about his work is that it is not fluffy. It's practical, honest, and it actually changes how people show up at work. Mark, I am so glad you are here and so excited that I was asked to talk with you today. Welcome, and how are you?
Thank you very much, Carla. I'm very excited to be here as well. I'm very well, thank you. Yes, enthused and looking forward to our conversation. I'm
right.
loving the podcast series that the Gold Coast Speakers Directory is after creating. I think it's a fabulous idea.
I totally agree. So let's jump straight in.
Sure.
Mark, if I dropped you on stage right now with no slides, no prepping time, what's the first thing you'd say to hook the audience?
Very good question. I think where I'm landing most recently is well-being is a better predictor of business success than engagement is. And I think mattering is at the core of that. Should I explain that a little bit? Maybe I should.
Please. Yes.
Okay. All right. Look, we've been measuring engagement as a success kind of metric, if you like. For the last 12 or more years. It hasn't shifted in any sort of significant way. Rule of thumb: 1 in 4 of your people are deeply engaged. 1 in 4 are actively disengaged, which says they're kind of disruptive, if you like, and harmful to the business. And then the other 2 of the 4 are sort of hovering in the middle, and they kind of go above and below the line depending on circumstances, if you like. No matter what we have been through, and we've been through a lot in the last 10 or 12 years, globally and especially here in Australia, and that engagement measurement hasn't really shifted very much at all. And so I come to the conclusion, and actually I've shared this with a global expert. His name is Mark C. Crowley, who's worth a look. He's got some fabulous books. And he's a very engaging person. He's got a brilliant podcast as well. But Mark's has the same sort of idea. He's probably more eloquent at it than I am. But we agree that well-being is a better predictor of success than engagement. So engagement, I'm coming to the conclusion that it's like a lagging indicator, in the sense that it's very likely to be an outcome of success to the business. Than a predictor of it, if you like. And so very much it could be the result of a successful business rather than the cause of it. And so in looking at that and exploring that idea, I've come across some significant Harvard research and others that have found that actually a team that feels like they belong and feel like they matter and are supported to be who they are and the best versions of themselves will be a better predictor of the success of the business than engagement is. And in fact, sometimes when we look at, what is success, and to the business, success is an outcome. It's a result. It's a number on a spreadsheet, we'll say. But to a team, it's actually a feeling. Right? Yeah, so to a team, it's actually a feeling first. And it's that feeling of connected engagement, cohesion, well-being is going to be the driver of that success and the driver of that number. So it's a feeling first, in my opinion. And so that's probably, now that's been longer than 60 seconds, but my 60-second opening line would be: well-being is a better predictor of success in your business than engagement is. And mattering to your people is right at the core of that. That's
mattering to your people, and that's a great way of putting it, I think. And I just love it because you straight away are pulling people, instead of warming them in, you are pulling them in, which
It's an
I
interesting.
think,
It makes people, sit and just think about that for a second, and then
yeah,
then I might have to say what mattering actually is, and
yeah,
and again there are people like Zach Mercurio, Professor Gordon Flett, both Canadians, and they talk about mattering is this sense that we all like to know that we belong, and Brené Brown's books on belonging, etc. Like, everybody follows it, makes a lot of sense, but
yeah,
I think there's more than just knowing that we can be ourselves in the workplace and that we
yeah,
feel like we belong to something bigger than ourselves. I think we also need to know that our contribution is more than just our presence,
mm,
and that's what mattering is about. Feeling noticed, feeling needed, and feeling
yeah,
nurtured, if you like, or necessary to a team. And when we
mm,
feel that we matter, there's an inherent sort of motivation and obligation to actually meet that definition. So mattering, it's more than belonging, and it's knowing that our
mm.
presence is worth more than us.
and
Or
that's and
our
that's why
outcome is
we've
more than just yeah.
yeah, and that's why we've all got a unique fingerprint, isn't it? That
Yeah,
is
totally.
different from everyone else.
And you could ask, and anybody watching this podcast, I'd invite you to just think about back to your childhood, even.
Yeah,
And was there a teacher in your life at some point that spent the time to sit one on one with you and let you know that you're good enough, or that you're clever maybe than you think you are, and that you have a very good future, and these are your strengths, and this is what makes you so good. And I think just about everybody will remember a teacher who made them feel like that as a kid, right? And nobody will remember what the teacher said, but how they made you feel. Like Maya
definitely.
Angelou's idea that people won't remember what you said or did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I think just about everybody has a story where they felt like that at some point in time.
Yeah,
And years, decades later, in fact, they still remember the event or the occasion or how it made them feel. We can do
true.
that in the workplace. Harvard research
Indeed.
says you only need to feel that about 6 times in a year to have a leader thank you for something that you've contributed to. Specifically, not just a, hey, well done everyone on a great week, but
Yeah,
specifically thanking you for something that you've done.
yeah,
6 times a year is all we need, and we're something like 15% more productive.
yeah. Well, it's very, very interesting. And
Yeah.
following on from this, you talk a lot on burnout,
Yeah.
and it is not always what people think. Like the general population assumes that it's exhaustion.
Yeah, tired. I'm
So, how
exhausted.
would you actually explain burnout in a way that makes people go, "Oh, that's me"?
Yeah. Again, if I was to walk on a stage and I had, 60 seconds to land the idea, I would say burnout is everyone's business. And it's not
Yeah.
just me. And it's not just tired. Burnout in its truest sense changes how we think, how we feel, and even how we function. And so the best definition I can give people is burnout is essentially suppressed emotions. Now that sounds a bit sort of woo-woo for somebody who lives in Byron Bay. I deal with this all the time. But the definition, I would say, the reason why I say that, when you think about somebody who's experiencing burnout, they feel exhausted. And it could be mental, physical, or emotional. Inside our tip, it'll be emotional exhaustion, because mental or physical exhaustion we can recover quickly with a break. Emotional exhaustion is a lot more entrenched. We feel that the official word they use is efficacy. I'm not a fan of the word. I think ability is a better word. We lose the ability to do our best work. And then we feel like we can't keep up. We feel like we're a failure. We feel like we're not supporting everybody. We feel like we're letting people down. And I feel stupid because I can't do simple arithmetic, or I can't remember meeting deadlines, or I can't remember appointments. We get that kind of brain fog. And so with feeling exhausted and feeling like I'm not doing my best work, we become what the definition says is we become cynical, which is kind of jaded or disengaged. And again, that's a feeling. Yeah. And so I feel exhausted, but I push it down and keep going. I feel some shame or guilt that I can't keep up, or I feel kind of I'm not good enough, and I push it down and keep going until I can't. And then I feel jaded and disconnected and disengaged, and I feel apathetic, and all of those are feelings first that we suppress, we push down and push away until we can't anymore. And so, when people say, so how do we recover from burnout? And I just, well, start listening to your body first of all. That's the first thing you got to do. And when you start doing that, then you'll start to develop the sorts of boundaries that you need in order to support yourself. And the other interesting point that I will probably come to in a minute again anyway, when people ask me, so how do I recover? Our sense is we've pulled back, we've pulled away, we isolate a little bit because we're trying to keep up with the work, and of course we can't because we're feeling overwhelmed.
Already.
And I say to people, the best way to recover is actually find some joy, because that's the first thing that you've jettisoned. The first thing that we've gotten rid of is that sense of joy and play and fun and activities or behaviors without consequence. And so that's the first thing that we push away, and I said that's the first thing you need to get back. And when we were chatting earlier, I said I've had 2 major burnout, spectacular burnout periods in my career, and I resolved them. The most recent one was I said I need to get some joy back in my life. I got a dog, so suddenly now I'm meeting people, other dog owners, when we're walking the dogs, and some of my dearest friends now are fellow dog owners from sort of in the locality. So now I have a new group of friends to hang out with. We have a common purpose. I'm getting exercise twice a day. The other thing I took up was archery. Who knew? Like, if you'd said to me a few weeks beforehand you would try archery as a sport, I would have laughed at you. But the stars aligned. Somebody I knew was going to do it with their kids, and they were trying it as well, and I said, I'll come along. And I was obsessed from the very first shot. But again, meeting people I didn't know, doing something that I was really enjoying. Meditative, it's exercise, it's connecting, and it's engaging with other people. All the stuff that gets lost when we start to burn out. And what I did in that time is I injected 17 hours into my week doing stuff that I loved, and it didn't affect my work. I didn't have to pull back on my work. I just prioritized, and because I was enjoying life and just really enjoying what I was doing, I was able to embrace the work again. And so sometimes, we pull back to get ahead, but other times you actually just move forward into finding that sort of motivation, I think, is probably what it is, or sense of purpose, a sense of meaning or value, and find some joy.
I must say, you must have been very, very strong to have, to have said that, it looks like I am getting burnt out, like to be made aware of it and to name it and to label it as it is. I find this to be a great strength, because only then we can do something about it, isn't it?
Exactly right. And actually, here's another insider tip for anybody watching this. Burnout's a creeper. We don't see it coming, right? And because we're suppressing the emotions, we miss all of the signals. But here's the thing, if you've experienced burnout, you are much more susceptible to experiencing it again sometime in your career. But you're also much more aware of it. So the first time you're experiencing burnout, it'll take somebody else pointing it out to you before you'll admit to it, because you make every excuse under the sun. Second time you go, here it comes again. Now I need to know. Now I know what to do, right? So every cloud, I suppose, if you have experienced burnout before, it's going to happen again.
And then hopefully you would be able to understand the signs of it creeping up before it fully does.
Before it totally gets me. But it was really interesting. There was about 17 years between the 2 burnout periods in my life. And the first one I had no idea what happened for some time. But the second one I went, here it comes. And even then, it took me a while for me to sort of admit to it, if you like. But the solution is actually really enjoyable. That's the quandary, I suppose. Yeah.
Mark, you are an expert on burnout, which is quite an intense topic. I find it really interesting that you do bring humor into a topic that is really heavy. So how would you open a keynote on burnout in a way that doesn't make the room feel heavy straight away?
Yeah, look, is it humor? I suppose it is humor. I use it to kind of open the door, but not to water the issue down. But you kind of have to normalize what it is. And that's the same with any mental health conversation, Carla. You know, as we were saying earlier when we were chatting, I've done a considerable amount of work in the clinical space and running treatment programs, developing treatment programs, clinical director in treatment facilities, etc. And you kind of need a sense of humour sometimes, but I think it's really important that people that we're talking to don't feel lectured or shamed or kind of emotionally pinned to the wall. And I used to try to be earnest about it, but I kind of came across as Father Flanagan with the Irish accent. You know what I mean? And I realised that the earnest thing doesn't really land. And so you kind of have to have a bit of just to lighten it a little bit. We're not lightening the topic. We're just making it more accessible for people, so people don't feel, they can say, "Oh God, that is me." That's kind of what it's like, and I think that's important to do. It's a heavy topic, and it's going to be heavy if you're speaking at a conference or a keynote or training a leadership team or something like that. You have to just kind of lighten it a little bit. Yeah, and usually stories will do it. Yeah, and everyone's got them. Everyone's got the stories, so it's about sharing.
And it's really good to see that you do have that skill, because it is really a skill to make people feel, safe enough to laugh, but still be able to lend the message.
Yeah, it's okay to laugh about it, it's a different conversation to, we'll say, grief or something really heavy. Or post-traumatic stress or something like that. They're a bit more difficult to laugh about, But if we can, in some way, normalise the conversation, then I think it's really to everyone's benefit that we do.
Indeed. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about leaders for a second. And you mentioned earlier is that people need to feel that they belong. And that's what is going to impact their productivity level. There are still people sitting in leadership roles thinking, well, mental health, this is a HR's job. So how or what would you say that really challenges that mindset?
Yeah, I think the first thing leaders need to understand is that mental health is not HR's role. Never actually was. And in the same way that the culture in your team is not HR's job, it's your job as a leader to cultivate that sort of feeling in that sense. But the flip side to that then is you're not chaplains, you're not counsellors, nobody expects you to have the answers to the mental health and well-being of your people. Now, skills. That said, you have a responsibility to follow where possible, a prevention sort of mindset. A hierarchy of, if you're talking about work health and safety, prevention is where we're at. In the same way that we don't say, if somebody falls off the stepladder, we'll get them the best treatment available. No, we stop people from falling off the stepladder. That's what we do. Sure. And it's the same thing with people's mental health and well-being. Let's not treat it as an emergency thing that has to be dealt with. It's ever present in your team. And whatever the size of your team, when you look at the statistic that 1 in 5 people today will experience a mental health challenge. They already are, or they will sometime this year in your team. And so if we're on, we'll say, a Zoom or a Teams meeting and you have the gallery of people, I will say, just look at the people around you. One of them is experiencing a mental health challenge right now. And if they all look okay, well then statistically it's going to be you. And if you're adamant you're okay, well then one of them is hiding it really well. Why are people hiding the mental distress that they're experiencing? And it'll be for reasons of, shame and stigma, etc. And as leaders, then it's your job to create an environment where that's less likely to occur. And so people can speak up. That we're talking about psychological safety, and I'm sure we'll get into that conversation in a few minutes, because these are all intertwined. But leaders, this is the one time when you don't have to have the answers. All you have to do is create safety, and let the rest take care of itself. And in fact, you're a clinician, and I'm a clinician, and how many times have people said to you, "Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it to get better." They go, "Well, let's look at your options." We never tell
some people
somebody
ask for pills, really.
Yeah, there's that as well. But you'd never tell somebody what to do to get better. Relationship counselors will never tell you to leave the person or anything like that.
Yeah.
We create safe space for you to explore what's possible. And as a leader, you can do that as well, and don't worry about losing control. And you can give people some options. I like to coach leaders in offering sort of 3 possible things that they might want to do, or how we may be able to support them. And the reason why there's 3, if you give someone, you can do this or that, that's not really a choice. That's not agency. That's not giving them sort of autonomy, if you like. That's actually making the decision rather than a choice, and they'll decide the one that they don't want to do, and then they'll do the other one. So if you put 3 in there, look, we could do this, or perhaps you could do that.
Let us explore each option.
Yeah, and let's explore each and see which one lands for you. And the third one might be, you could do nothing. We don't have to invent anything, but it's really, what do you need from me right now? How can I help? The primary, secondary, and tertiary idea. We do it in education. It's also in health. Primary care is your GP, secondary specialist, tertiary I would say would be hospitalization or something like that. And you can do the same thing in your team or in the workplace. What can I do to help you right now or support you?
Yeah.
What could the team do to support you right now? What could the organization do? And so we're giving people the opportunity to have some sort of autonomy and agency in what's going to work for them. And if you don't jump into rescue and save, they're not going to sit back and let you do the rescuing and saving. So leaders, it's actually far easier than you think it is if you know how to phrase and structure the conversation. And you don't have to have the answers. It's a wonderful release. Leaders find this is a great release for them.
Yeah, and that is where the shift is really about, isn't it? Like moving from curative to preventative measures.
Yeah. That's how we can support them. That's when it's already begun. But in terms of prevention, if you have that psychological safety in a team, well then you're much more likely to be able to create the environment where we don't continually make mistakes, and we're not in a triage, we're actually in the prevention space. Silence is expensive. Look at it that way. That's kind of the way I look at it. Yeah.
Mark, you talk a lot about moving from reactive to preventative mental health. And I think that really sounds great in theory, but a lot of workplaces don't know what that actually looks like. So practically, what does preventative mental health look like day to day in a workplace?
I think it's stop treating well-being as an emergency sort of service and something that's aside from the job. We have to tackle and deal with now. Well-being is not fruit on a Friday. You know what I mean? It's well-being is being well. What can I do to help my team be well and be at their best? And start treating it like this is how good work gets done. But it's become a bit of a box ticking exercise, well-being in the workplace. And as we said right at the very beginning, it's actually a better predictor of success. It's directly linked to share price, directly linked to all sorts of positive metrics in organizations. So what does it look like day to day in a workplace? I think it's ensuring that we have each other's backs. Burnout is everybody's business. We said that earlier as well. It's not just something that somebody suffers in silence. And if, as we said earlier, if someone in the team is burning out, it's very likely they haven't seen it yet. So it relies on one of us to be able to say something. And so then we start talking about psychological safety, and the ability to it's okay to not be okay, And if I raise a challenge I'm experiencing, my colleagues, my team, my leader will play the ball, not the player, and create that environment for me, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is where the real change happens, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. And as a leader, it's free. It doesn't cost anything to create that environment in your team. So
exactly.
People and culture leaders, anybody watching this, we can do this stuff. It's inexpensive. It's free in actual fact, beyond maybe some coaching or training for your people. But it's free to implement psychological safety in a team. And there's fun ways of doing it. If it's not something that you normally do. I've done this at conferences several times. Whether an internal organization conference, that's actually where it's the most fun. But I've said to an audience, I'm going to make a statement now that's going to divide the room. It's going to split the room, and everybody's going to have an opinion on it, probably a couple of different ones. And I say, pineapple has absolutely no business on a pizza. Turn to the person next to you, and the place erupts. There's noisy conversations, and you'll see hand gestures and all the rest of them. And I bring them back, and I say, all right. And then I have a few others that I do as well. You can do toilet paper. Is it fringe or is it mullet? Which is the way should it be? And that's broken marriages. That one. The Bunnings sausage, onions on top or onions underneath. And everyone has an opinion on these things, right? And so you can have a great conversation. And then you bring everyone back into the room. And the question then is, I'm much less concerned about what the answer is. I'm much more concerned about, were you able to voice your opinion? And did you feel heard? And were you able to debate it robustly, it sounded like to me? And did anybody change their mind? But did everybody feel heard? And that is a fun way of that's psychological safety. Much better to do something like that with your team than say, okay, today we're going to focus on psychological safety. Don't ever mention the phrase, just introduce it. Leader, we got a meeting, and look, there's nuances to this, of course, but a leader can say to a team, we're meeting in 3 days' time. There's a pressing question that I'd like to get a solution to, and I want to hear everybody's opinions. So no hogs, no logs. This is the question, and this is the answer. This is we're looking for a solution to this problem. Everybody come with your ideas. And then the leader starts the meeting. Simon Sinek talks about this quite a lot. Leader, sit back and say nothing until everybody's had their say. Now, you might have introverts in the team who need a bit of prep and a bit of time, so an agenda is a very good idea. And other people talk about, we've got, what do you call it? We've got the devil's advocate who has a different opinion to everybody, just to be bloody awkward and have a debate. And I often say to leaders, right, here's your trick. If you've got one of those, next meeting, ask them to run the meeting, because then they can't say anything until the very end. So that's how that process works. The leader asks everyone for their opinion, can ask questions, but saves the leader his or her response until the very end. And then said, great, having heard from everybody, in fact, I've heard a few new ideas we hadn't even thought about, so let me think about this, and I'll give you I'll give you our solution in a couple of days. Or you can decide there and then. But if you got the argumentative person, the devil's advocate person, get them to run the meeting, the next meeting, and then they can't say anything till right at the very end, and then everyone gets to share. So there's,
there you
there
go.
are ways
So there is a solution to every problem. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're doing that, then you're not saying we're being psychologically safe, but everyone starts to understand.
Yeah.
There was
Definitely.
a great Ford Motor Company. I can't think of the new CEO, but he came in, and the problem in the organization was it was running, deadlines and budgets, everything were being missed, and in the management meetings they would sort of start by saying, let's okay, so where's everyone at today, and red, orange, or green, and where you are with your project, and everybody was kind of saying, oh, it's green, we're doing fine. And then one day somebody said, I'm stuck, I've got a problem, and silence fell in the office, in the boardroom. and the new CEO said, well done, thank you for acknowledging, how can we help? And then the next 4 or 5 weeks meetings, suddenly all the red lights were coming up, and all the problems were being resolved quickly, cleanly, and everyone got to share. Simple. And then that happened from the top down. So, like we said earlier on, culture starts with the team. And I am way more interested in the culture of a team than I am in the culture of the organization, because I think that's where it's lived and breathed. So, back to that question, leaders, mental health and well-being of your people is not a HR thing, that's yours. It's yours to own, but it's not difficult when you know how.
Yeah.
Same thing with psychological safety. The team is going to create that, not the organization.
And it does, or it is a domino effect, isn't it? Once it starts, that's it. It will impact everyone. Let us talk about
commercially. It'll cost you. If you don't have a psychologically safe team, it'll cost you. Attrition, and you lose retention, you lose creativity, engagement, and performance. If you don't have it, but even humanly, it kind of costs people the energy it takes to keep sort of self-presenting every day. If that makes sense.
It would take out the pleasure that you were referring to earlier on. You said, we need to have fun, and once we have fun, we are going to do more things, and our productivity levels are going to get higher, definitely. So let's talk about let's talk about the flip side of this. What is the actually cost what's the actual cost to a business when psychological safety is missing? You had started to mentioning some of the costs.
Yeah, look, it's an obvious flow, so we've talked about what it does give us: innovation, team cohesion, engagement, well-being. A psychologically safe team is going to feel safe to try something different, new way of doing things. That's hugely important, because when I feel heard and I feel like I matter, then I'm going to do my best work because I'm motivated to do so.
Definitely.
When it's not there, and people talk in a meeting, and you see eyes rolling, or sideways glances and that sort of thing, you just know this is not authentic, genuine sort of feeling. And the silence then that comes from people when they won't share when there's a problem or not, that becomes really expensive. Dr. Amy Edmondson is the person who's kind of spearheaded psychological safety, and hers came from she was reviewing 2 medical teams at a teaching hospital that was trying out a really, really innovative new heart surgery process, treatment model. And there were 2 teams, and one was led by a senior surgeon who loved everybody sharing, everybody owning up to mistakes or questioning him, asking, why are we doing it this way, what about that way, that sort of thing. And the other surgeon who ran the other team was very much didn't suffer fools gladly, didn't like to be questioned, didn't like that sort of conversation happening in the surgery when he was running it. And no, they didn't So the two teams, one made lots of mistakes, admitted them, figured it out, and solved them and found new ways of working. The other team made the same mistakes, but they were never spoken about. So they were much, much slower to get a positive result, and stuff was covered up, etc. So it wasn't that one team was better than the other. They were both equally competent. It's just that one dealt with issues when they arose, and it was safe to raise the question, safe to point out an error or a mistake that could be costly. And so they pioneered the research strategy far sooner than the other team did. And that was essentially where this whole idea of we need to be able to speak up, we need to be able to share this when it happens. So that's where it came from. So the silence in that case is expensive. And commercially, as I was just saying, it costs you retention and it costs you trust and all of the good stuff when you don't have it. But humanly, it costs the people the energy that they need, because you're spending as much energy hiding and covering up and being silent and trying not to stand out. That takes more energy than actually being authentic and having the conversations that need to be had. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, and too many leaders are really paying that cost, but without even realizing it, isn't it?
I wouldn't know. Yeah, because they feel some leaders cannot be. They kind of fear the vulnerability. And yet one of the best bosses I think I ever had. She had a great line. I would ask something, and she would say, I don't know the answer to that, but let's find out. And suddenly, we were together solving a problem. And the connection, the sincerity, the authenticity of it, just felt, this person is human. And I think what we're kind of looking for in our leaders, I reckon, is we would rather presence over perfection.
I like
yeah,
that, yeah.
I want somebody that, is just like me, rather than somebody who wants to have all the answers and solve all the problems, and because we'll just defer to them. And that's kind of like an alpha, or actually what we thought an alpha was. We've actually changed now. And I spend a lot of my time redefining what alpha actually means. People think from the research that was done years ago, from the 30s to about the 60s, we did research on wolves in captivity, right? And what we found was there was a sort of a fight and a jostling for position at the very, very top, because it was felt like the alpha male then runs the whole show, and all the decisions are made by the alpha. It's actually not true. What we learned, a guy called David Meck did research in the 70s and realized, hang on, we've had it wrong all of this time. And so told all the human and animal behaviorists that actually what we were doing was we were measuring stress. We weren't measuring wolves' natural behavior, because they were captivated. They were captured wolves held in isolation from their packs. And so, they fought to the top for resources, etc. But that was totally based on stress, and as you would know, trauma, right? And we realized that that's actually not what an alpha male is. But the business world didn't catch up. We thought alpha was, the dominant personality. They actually come across as domineering. And an alpha thinks that they're being assertive. They're actually, they're being aggressive. And that behavior is not alpha at all. A true alpha is the one that people turn to, the leader people turn to, for resources, for safety, for direction, but mostly safety. And so the team that has a leader who creates that environment where everybody feels protected, but also they feel like they contribute, and it's not all just the leader's sort of decision making. That's the best team, and it's also the best leader. So
we are going to go back to this, because you have recently finished writing your 4th book on alpha.
Yes,
personalities.
I have.
Haven't
Redefining
right.
alpha. Yeah. Okay.
If there is one question every leader should be asking their team, or if you were to simplify it, what do you think that question should be?
To be most effective, I think I would, and any leadership sort of training that I do, there's probably two questions. And the first one, because I'm always involved in burnout, and here's the interesting thing for burnout in a team. For the lower sort of levels, if you like, the team members that are not leaders, etc. Generally, if they're experiencing burnout, it's going to be workload in some way, shape, or form. The design of the role they haven't job crafted. They don't know what they're really good at. They're kind of questioning themselves, are they good enough, etc. All those suppressed feelings we spoke about. But leaders themselves, what we're learning now is that the leaders who care the most are the ones who are succumbing to burnout the most, because they're using empathy, they're misusing empathy. They've been told, be more empathetic with your team and show more empathy to your team. And the ones who care the most take on the emotional baggage of the team and try to protect them from what's coming on high. Right? So what's coming down from the organization, strategies, deadlines, change processes, performance results, outcomes, etc. All of that's coming from on high, and then they're getting the emotional turmoil from the people below who are being asked to do more with less, and they're succumbing to the levels of overwhelm. So what's actually burning middle tier leaders out is that emotional strain of trying to keep the whole thing together, delivering policy and strategy that they've had no input into, and layoffs and AI and everything else that's going on at the moment, while dealing with a distressed team. That's the biggest burden for leaders today. So there are two questions I think a leader can ask their people, that again gives them agency and autonomy, if you like. And what's making it harder than it needs to be to do the work that we're currently doing right now? So what's making it really hard to do our work right now? And probably the other one is, and this is more of a question for one-on-one, possibly for the team, but what do you need from me to be a success today? And a leader that asks that of their people, if the only conversation as a leader you have with your people today is to start your morning with that, it's called lighting the fire. And where that idea came from is a little story again. And I came across it. There was a mentor of mine told me loosely the story, and then I was researching it and I came across it much later. And it's about the nomadic hill tribes of Namibia. Now, I could ask a team of leaders, so what do you know about the nomadic hill tribes of Namibia? And generally speaking, if you say I don't know anything, I would be okay with that, because that's very believable. But what happens with these hill tribes, because they're nomadic, it's very important to them that their ancestors know where they are, because they're always on the move. And so the tribal leaders' kind of biggest job is to ensure that there is a connection between the ancestors and today. And what that looks like is the fire in the center of the village. That's the sort of central point, symbolically. And so at night time, the chief takes some embers from the fire to his hut, and then that chief is up in the morning before sunrise and before everybody else is up, and he's got the fire lighting in the center of the village. And very often that's the only role he takes in the day. And it sounds like the kind of role that would be sort of for somebody at the bottom of the pecking order, if you like. You get up before everybody and you light that fire. But what in actual fact the tribal chief doing it says, I'm here, I'm watching out for you, I'm looking out for you, I got your backs, and we're all here together. That's the message that's being delivered. And so when I'm telling that story to a group of leaders, it's not difficult to make the leap that I'm saying, okay, you're the tribal leader, so how are you lighting the fire for your team every day? What does that look like? And maybe it is, what do you need from me today to be a success? right? And so you're giving people the autonomy to do the work that they need to do. They know you've got their backs. You're after lighting the village fire for them, and they can sort of go about their day. But if you have psychological safety in your team, they'll be able to tell you what they need. Insider tip: if you've got somebody who needs to be performance managed, then you're in a great position to say, look, I've asked you every day for the last month, what do you need from me? And your performance still isn't lifting. We're going to have to dive a little deeper into what you need from me. And this looks like a performance conversation, but you're valued, we care about you. The only reason we're having this conversation is because I want you to succeed. What do you think that looks like, or what do you think we need to do? And again, it's agency and it's autonomy, and it's caring.
It's caring.
So I think that's you asked me what was one question. That's two, but they're kind of the same thing.
Two awesome questions that would definitely change the entire team dynamics, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You were talking, and I was thinking, the questions. These questions may seem simple, but you have worked with a lot of leaders. What do they say, and how hard is it, for leaders to change some of their ways? Like when you go into a company and you introduce these types of, let's call them behaviors, what are people scared of? Those that are a little bit guarded, what do they fear?
Sadly, very often they fear showing their true selves. And so, and sometimes, you have to do that a little bit by bit sometimes, but the authentic leader, and this again might sound a bit woo-woo, but being yourself as a leader, when you have that sort of curiosity and openness and trust in your own ability to lead a team, you don't have to micromanage. You don't have to run your team in such a way that you're across every little detail. Apple, as a prime example, say we don't employ people to do what we tell them. We employ people to tell us what to do, right? And so leaders.
Makes sense.
The people in your team, they're in your team because you trust them to be able to do the work that's required of them, and you're here to provide resources. That's what makes you an alpha. And it's not bullying, it's not managing. I often say, manage the work, manage the numbers, but lead your people, and sort of look at it that way. And so very often, I think when they learn and when they discover that it's actually not, it's not that difficult to be that kind of a leader. It's trusting in yourself to be able to do it. And some leaders say, I can't show vulnerability because someone in my team will want my job. And if that's your reason for micromanaging, I think they'll probably get your job sooner or later anyway. But if you lead your team in a way that everybody feels safe, they feel like they can trust each other, they feel like they belong, and that their contribution matters, you're the leader that everybody wants.
Yeah. And
right?
That is what sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Yeah, I was just going, you don't have to have all the answers all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, let's go find out.
Yeah, I was
inspiring. Yeah.
I was going to say, and this is what makes a person a leader and not a boss, because leaders do bring their staff up, don't they?
Yes, they do. They lift people around them to be the best versions of themselves. Just being the boss, that's very often it's a title, and it should actually be a motivation. And you can be a leader without leading people. You could be someone in the team that other people look up to. A subject matter expert in your team can lead people in that sort of sense, So I say, you manage the numbers, lead the people. That's kind of how I usually sort of talk about it. Yeah.
Mark, you have written 3 books, and you have just finished your fourth one. What can you tell us about your books?
Oh, look, well, I've just written one called Redefining Alpha, and it's interesting when you write books for leaders today. They don't look for 40, 50,000 words. They want one idea and write me a book that I can read on a flight from Sydney to Melbourne, or I can read on a flight from Melbourne to Brisbane, or whatever it is. So it doesn't take long to read Redefining Alpha. It's pretty quick. That's the first point. Second point is I write books to give away. My accountant hates me for it, but I'm not in the authoring business. I authored books, and they're edited, and that's a painstaking process, soul destroying process. But I write them as a vehicle to sort of extend my ideas in a deeper way than we sometimes get a chance to do. Probably the most successful one is the one that's called Up Yours. It's a cheeky title, but it's about upping your radical self-care. By radical, I mean foundational, from the ground up. And I wrote that book during COVID in response to work that I was being asked to do around looking after people's well-being beyond sleep, diet and exercise. There's all the information is out there on that stuff. But I ran and still do run a program where we talk about sleep, diet and exercise to an extent, but we talk about burnout. We talk about looking out for each other. What does that look like? We talk about self-awareness, self-compassion, emotional intelligence, elements of positive psychology, some meaning and purpose, etc. Work smarter, not harder, resilience. And so the book covers each of those areas, because you're a clinician as well, Carla. You'll know that when you're treating somebody, the symptoms are just that, the symptoms, and very often it's the work around the whole of person is where the biggest results come from, and we can't just pick at things in isolation. Modern medicine today talks about, we call it the biopsychosocial model, and so there's a complex interaction between genetic and physical, biological reasons, psychological reasons, and then the environment we find ourselves in, and pretty much all ailments will be affected by some complex interaction between all of those. And so Up Yours is that. We look at, we look in, we kind of look up, stop and smell the roses, and then we look in at brain health and all, the inflammation and everything else that happens as a result of chronic stress. But then we also look out, belonging, playtime, connection, engagement, all of the stuff that we were speaking about earlier, that is absolutely vital to be a vibrant version of ourselves. And so Up Yours is about that, upping your self-care. That's probably the biggest one. The next one then, What's Up, is just about finished, and that is how to have critical caring conversations. And that's for leaders. We're experiencing rupture, risk, rapid change. We're experiencing all of these things in the workplace today, and psychological safety requires us to be able to have a conversation, and challenging leaders to not have all the answers, just ask the right questions and empower people to find solutions for themselves, just like you and I do as clinicians. As we said earlier on, we're not in the business for giving people answers. In fact, I did some of my training involved a supervisor one day turning to me after supervising a session with a client. I said, "So how did I do? What do you think? That was all right, wasn't it? That went well, I thought." And he said, "How dare you?" And I said, What did I do wrong?" He said, "How dare you rob them of their experience?" He said they were experiencing high emotional, it was something about their mother, I think, from memory, but they were emotionally sort of triggered by it, and you jumped in to rescue and save them. And I said, "Yeah, but I didn't want them to be overwhelmed by the emotional response." He goes, "It's not your job. Your job is to allow them to experience it in a way that's safe, so that they won't come to harm, and you're there to sort of catch them if something goes wrong. But you don't steal the emotion from them And you know, that's the message for leaders today as well. Empathy is great, but if it becomes the case where you're jumping in to rescue and save, there's no faster way to burnout for middle leaders. So your job is to allow the emotions to arise, and it could be conflict in your team, but let it be spoken about. Just contain it. We can deal with what we can control, and then give it back to them in the form of some kind of purpose or you know, something to aspire to. That's leadership. You know, you're not your job to rescue and save people.
Awesome. And my last question to you, Mark, is you talk a lot on a notion that you call "can we talk?" And I love that phrase because it sounds simple. It's actually one of the hardest things for leaders to do. Why are those conversations difficult?
Look, the conversations I think are difficult because leaders, they're afraid of, you know, I'm going to open a Pandora's box by asking, you know, my people how they are, and I don't know the answers, and am I being nosy? I don't know what to say. What if I'm the problem? You know, am I exposing myself sort of legally to any kind of ramifications? That leaders have all of these fears, but in actual fact, if it's coming from the heart and you're asking somebody, look, can we have a conversation? I'm a little concerned. I'm a little worried. You know, these I statements that we talk about, I feel statements, far better to say, you know, if I said, Carla, you're not yourself lately. You haven't been speaking up in meetings. Are you okay? No, if you're not okay, what you've heard there is two statements or two accusations and a closed question that you're going to say, yeah, I'm fine, mind your own business, right? But if I said to you, Carla, you know, hey, can we talk for a minute? I just wanted to just ask a question, and I'm asking this because I'm a little concerned, or I'm curious, or I've noticed that you're not quite yourself lately. You're not joining us for coffee, or you're not speaking up in meetings, and I just wanted to check in how you're doing. And you know, is there anything you need from us, or is there some way I can help, or what's happening for you? You're going to be much more inclined to answer.
Exactly.
And even if you don't, and even if you then say, no, I'm fine, then as a leader, what I've done is I've created the safe space already. And I said, okay, well, look, if I'm still worried in a week, I'll probably ask you again. In the meantime, if you want to have a chat anytime, here I am. I just want you to know you're a valued member of the team, and if there's some way I can be better at supporting you, just let me know. Yeah. It's going to be a much better outcome, isn't it? But leaders feel like, oh, if I ask Carla what's wrong and she tells me and I don't know the answers, I don't have the solutions.
Then
you're not supposed to. My job will be to create safety for Carla so that she can find the answers for herself.
So really it is not about the words, but it's about what comes with them.
Yeah. Can we talk? And you know, the double play in it is, can we talk? Can you as a leader have a conversation or not? And are you afraid to have a conversation? And we remove those fears in training with them, so that they do learn that it's okay to be able to just ask the question and to help create the safety. Yeah. It's a lovely thing when it happens.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it is not just about the workplaces, but it is about people's lives, isn't it?
People, and you know, safety in the workplace says everybody deserves to go home safe, you know, go home from work. Yeah. Everybody deserves to get to go home. But everybody deserves to get to go home at least content. You don't have to be happy in your work, but at least content. You know, I've done a good day. I feel like I've contributed. I feel like, you know, the team is behind me. God, that was a tough day, but we got through it. That's the sort of stuff people should be able to go home with.
Mark Butler, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a powerful conversation.
Thank you, Carla. I really enjoyed it as well. And there were some challenging questions. Thank you. Well done. I loved it.
You have answered them extremely well. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today on the Gold Coast Speakers podcast. If you would like Mark to speak at your next event right here on the Gold Coast, then head over to the Gold Coast Speakers directory at goldcoast.com speakers.com.au, and you can find all of the links and contact details for Mark and a whole range of amazing speakers. Mark Butler, thank you again for your time and allowing me the honor of having this chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Gold Coast Speakers podcast. If you loved this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're looking for your next speaker, or even ready to step onto more stages yourself, you know where to find us. goldcoastspeakers.com.au. I'm JJ Person-Jones, founder of Gold Coast Speakers. And until next time, keep showing up, keep sharing your voice, and making waves.